Good evening from London and good evening from me, Dr. Dermot Hudson, Chairman of the British Group for the Study of the Juche idea, Chairman of KFA UK, and a warm welcome to everybody who's just joining. Tonight, I'm going to, as usual, talk, maybe not so long this time. So there'd be more time for people to put questions in the chat. And the topics I'm going to speak about tonight are the dual line, the twin line of developing the economy and defence, national defence in parallel, which I think is very important for a number of reasons. First of all, as someone's already pointed out in the chat, the forthcoming 9th Congress of the Workers' Party of Korea, yes, the Workers' Party of Korea is going to hold its 9th Congress very soon. Some people are saying it's going to take place within the next few days. Certainly, it is going to take place very soon. All indications point to it being held. There's been a number of preparatory meetings, so it's going to be held soon. And back in September, respected comrade Kim Jong-un said the 9th Congress of the Workers' Party of Korea would put forward the policy of simultaneously pushing forward the building of nuclear forces and conventional armed forces in the field of building up national defence. And so that was said last September 2025. And of course, at the same time, there will be another 5-year plan, so the economy will also be built rapidly alongside the build-up of nuclear and conventional forces, which I think is an excellent policy. And of course, this is very much a fundamental line of the Workers' Party of Korea and a sort of fundamental line of Juche-based socialism. And when I sort of announced this live stream and I said, going to be talking about the policy of building the economy and defence in parallel, someone put Pyongyang, which was the term given to the policy that was adopted in March 2013 at a plenary meeting of the Central Committee of the Workers' Party of Korea, which put forward the line of developing the nuclear force and economy in parallel, which the DPRK implemented with great success. And I'll come on to that in a minute or two. That the Pyongyang line or Pyongyang policy, the policy of building the nuclear force and economy in parallel, was actually a creative modern application or even a continuation of the original line of building the economy and defence in parallel, which was actually announced back in 1962, at the end of 1962, and it was announced at the fifth plenary meeting of the Fourth Central Committee of the Workers' Party of Korea that was held from the 10th to the 14th of December 1962. And the timing of this, I feel, was very, very significant, because this was actually about 6 or 7 weeks after the debacle of the Caribbean crisis, or as it's better known, the Cuban Missile Crisis, where the USSR, trying to assist the Cuban Revolution, stations nuclear missiles in Cuba, only for the damned Yankees to actually find out that they were there. And of course, Kennedy, who some people think was some kind of liberal and a peacemaker. He was a dreadful womanizer. You knew that. But anyway, Kennedy, whom President Kim Il-sung described as a rascal, actually denounced this and threatened World War III and put a naval blockade around Cuba and demanded that the missiles be withdrawn immediately. And it was on the 28th of October 1962 that the Soviets pulled out the missiles, and this matter had been settled through negotiations between the US and USSR. Cuba was not a party to these negotiations and did not have a seat at the negotiations. Now, some people say, oh, they were consulted. Well, that's very much a moot point. And you wonder if there was consultation, you wonder what form it could have taken. But anyway, as I say, it was settled between the USSR and the United States imperialists, and it was basically a very embarrassing act of capitulation by the USSR. It was a result of revisionism under Khrushchev in the USSR. And there's people who try to justify what happened, but no one could deny that it was a tremendous loss of face for the Soviets, and it created precedents that basically the weaponry of a socialist country is something that could be not absolute, but open to negotiation. Basically, the imperialists could tell a socialist country how many weapons it could have, where they're deployed, and this kind of thing. It was giving, it was creating a precedent for this kind of thing. And I was once told by DPRK diplomats, and this information is not widely public, that when the Chinese conducted their first ever nuclear test, because it wasn't just the Americans who didn't like it, it was the Soviets as well. And Chairman Mao consulted with President Kim Il-sung and asked him what he thought. And President Kim Il-sung said that there should be no limitation on the national defense capability of a socialist country. And yes, that is something I agree with, and I think it's a very important thing to always be borne in mind. Anyway, back to the whole question of the line of building the national economy and defence in parallel. The lesson of the Cuban Missile Crisis was that smaller countries could not rely on bigger countries to defend them. That was the very clear lesson that was taught by the Cuban Missile Crisis. And Comrade Kim Jong-il actually stated this several times. So the Workers' Party of Korea made a deep study of the situation and the lessons. And of course, it was also at this time that the imperialists were expanding their aggressions all over the world. They were expanding the Vietnam War. They'd already bullied Cuba. One of the very negative outcomes of the Cuban Missile Crisis was that Cuba was forced to accept so-called UN inspections, which of course were really US inspections. And in many parts of the world, the US imperialists were expanding their aggression. On the Korean Peninsula in 1961, in May 1961, you had the fascist military coup by Park Chung-hee, and tension on the Korean Peninsula increased a lot as the South Korean puppets, the DPRK puppets, and the US imperialists intensified their anti-DPRK moves. And do not forget that it was in 1957 that the US imperialists actually shipped nuclear weapons onto the Korean Peninsula. It was also in 1962 that modern revisionism had started had actually started before. I suppose it goes back to the 20th Congress of the Communist Party of the Soviet Union in 1956, and possibly a little bit before then. I mean, some people argue that modern revisionism started on the 5th of March 1953, but certainly by the late 50s and early 60s, modern revisionism was very much in evidence, and by the early 60s it started to run riot, as exemplified by the capitulation in Cuba and other sort of toadying, groveling incidents in different parts of the world where the Soviet Union capitulated, didn't support national liberation forces, and internally the Soviets even melted down some weapons. They were becoming quite pacifist, talking endlessly about peaceful coexistence with US imperialism. So the adoption of this new line of building the economy and defence in parallel was both anti-imperialist and anti-revisionist. At the same time, it was also totally based on the Juche idea, the idea of self-reliance in national defence, the idea that a country should rely on itself for its own defense and not look to others. The slogan of arms in one hand and a hammer and sickle in the other was put forward to symbolize the new dual line of building the economy and defense in parallel. It was also in 1963, in February 1963, that the slogan a match for 100 was adopted by the Korean People's Army. To the the idea being that each soldier of the Korean People's Army should be equal to 100 enemy soldiers, and this was put forward, even though revisionists, both outside the DPRK and those that existed within the DPRK, tried to oppose the slogan. And of course, those revisionists who remained in the Workers' Party of Korea, and I would point out here that revisionism was not finally defeated in the Workers' Party of Korea until 1967, when the last remnants of revisionism were finally eliminated in the Workers' Party of Korea and the DPRK. But the revisionists tried to oppose the dual line of building the economy and defense in parallel. And the DPRK was probably the only socialist country to have adopted this line. And obviously with the economy, you had the Chalima movement, and you had big increases in production, and the DPRK was able to complete socialist industrialization fully by 1960. In terms of defense, they had the line of arming the whole people. You had the Worker Peasant Red Guard, which had been created in January 1959, and there was also the policy of creating a cadre army, whereby every soldier in the Korean People's Army was trained to carry out the duties of the rank above in case of the loss of people in the next rank above, so they could take over when necessary. And there was also the building of underground defense complexes of underground fortifications. There was the slogan, "Fortify the whole country." So this line was pushed forward, and as I say, on both fronts there were big successes. For example, in 1967, the Korean workers boosted the gross value of industrial output by 17% compared to the year before. And this was despite putting a lot of massive effort into defense building, and grain output increased by an astonishing 16% again compared to the year before. And this was despite massive flood damage that occurred. And Yeah, I mean, it was a truly remarkable line. And also in the 1960s, the DPRK scored victories in the confrontation with the US imperialists. As I said in the last live stream, the USSS Pueblo, the armed spy ship, was captured by the Navy of the Korean People's Army on the 23rd of January 1968. And on the 15th of April 1969, the giant EC-121 spy plane was shot down by a KPA MiG fighter aircraft. And in fact, the commander of that squadron is a lecturer at the Victorious Fatherland Liberation War Museum of the DPRK. And I saw in today's KCNA that he gave a lecture on the occasion of the foundation of the Korean People's Army as a regular revolutionary armed force. So, it was a very the line was very successfully implemented by the Korean people under the leadership of the great leader, President Kim Il-sung. And the particular significance of it, I feel, is that it was always, or some people argued, that the USSR collapsed because it spent a lot of money on defense, and that that it was forced to because of the US, and that it could not keep up, and this caused the collapse of the Soviet Union. Well, I do not think that was true. I think revisionism, modern revisionism, caused the collapse of the USSR, not spending large sums of money on defense. But the DPRK's experience showed that with a revolutionary party and with the Juche idea, that it was possible to develop the economy and defense in parallel, and to increase both simultaneously. So I think this is very significant. This is an important fact. And I think the DPRK is probably the only country to successfully have implemented this line. Now, coming on to the modern application of the line, which is known as Pyongyang, well, that was decided at the March plenary meeting of the Central Committee of the Workers' Party of Korea. And it was put forward by respected Marshal Kim Jong-un that this was not simply to develop national defense in parallel with the economy, but the nuclear force in parallel with the economy. And since the line was agreed and implemented, been truly massive successes in defense work and building the economy in the DPRK, again proving that you can actually do both, and that the one does not contradict the other. Since the adoption of the Pyongyang line in 2013, the DPRK carried out several nuclear tests, including the first test of a hydrogen bomb, a H bomb, so that the DPRK had not only become a possessor of nuclear weapons, it had also become a H bomb power. And at the same time, it developed its intercontinental ballistic missile capacity, conducting many successful tests of intercontinental ballistic missiles that can reach the mainland of US imperialism. And as I've pointed out many times before, the DPRK is a member of the elite club of ICBBM nations. Even Britain doesn't have ICBBMs. They were abandoned under US pressure. The British British ICBM program was abandoned under pressure from the Americans in the early 70s. So the DPRK is ahead of Britain in terms of ICBMs. So basically, People's Korea crossed the nuclear finishing line under the Pyongyang line. At the same time, there's been a massive leap forward in living standards and in construction work. I mean, I actually saw the construction of Ryumyong Street, which was constructed within a year. And that's actually the size, well, of a small city. And there was also built the year before Mirai Scientist Street. So, you know, there's huge amounts of construction that has been successfully carried out. So, you know, under Juche, a socialist country can both build the economy and national defense at the same time. And, you know, I'm sure we hear more about the policy that's going to be adopted when the 9th Congress of the Workers' Party of Korea opens soon. So, you know, just to speak before I start taking a few questions from the chat, you know, let's just look at a few developments that are going on. Well, you know, I said about the 9th Congress, and on at the beginning of the week, we saw that the Sinuiju giant greenhouse farm was inaugurated in the presence of respected Marshal Kim Jong-un, and that looks absolutely huge. I mean, it's the size of a city. It will produce loads and loads of vegetables, you know, helping to improve the living standards of the people and their diet. And it was actually built on an island near Sinuiju, near the Chinese border, which had originally been earmarked to be a economic zone, but instead they've actually built a giant greenhouse farm there, which is a state farm, not a cooperative farm. So, you know, it's significant that reform and opening up have been thwarted by the construction of this greenhouse farm. And at the same time, there's been numerous ground-breaking ceremonies to build new entities for the 20 by 10 regional development program. And just to go back quickly to the subject of the Sinuiju greenhouse farm. This was I just briefly saw it flash up on Facebook. Fascist book or Zuckerberg book. Yeah, I saw this flash up that NK News, the CIA's prized munchkins, were slandering the building of the Senadu greenhouse farm, saying that it was built by prisoners of forced labour. Nothing could be further from the truth, and these kind of slanders by the NK News gang show that the jealousy of the capitalist West, the jealousy of the imperialists over the big successes being scored in construction in the DPRK. And these things are totally false. I mean, how could you create how could you create such a monumental sort of sized farm like the Senadu greenhouse farm by using prison labour? These kind of projects need creativity to be able to complete them. People, you couldn't force people to do this. It's slandering the patriotic enthusiasm of the Korean young people who want to build socialism and communism. And I think it also reflects a level of desperation by the hack writers at NK News, who many times predicted the collapse of the DPRK, but rather than it happening, the DPRK is actually growing stronger and stronger. And in terms of other events in the DPRK, very soon on Sunday the 8th, it will be the 78th anniversary of the foundation of the Korean People's Army as a regular revolutionary armed force. And I'll make a short video about that. But of course, the KPA has two foundation dates. It was first of all formed as the Korean People's Revolutionary Army, or Anti-Japanese People's Guerrilla Army, on the 25th of April 1932. But its foundation as a standing regular revolutionary armed force was on the 8th of February 1948. Other developments, well, KFA UK held their online annual general meeting last weekend. Very successful meeting. We've got all kinds of ideas out of that. We're going to try to hold a real live workshop on the one-day workshop on the Juche idea in the Midlands, and also an international online conference on Juche and Songun. Watch this space. We're going to set up a Greater London region of KFA UK as well. So it's all go at KFA UK. So I will finish there, and I will now run through the chat and see if there's stuff I need to answer. Yes, hello to Nothing But the Truth, and hello to DNZP9Q. It's good to Lozzo. It's actually a good evening here in London, but it might be good morning in other parts of the world, uh, and good afternoon. A rocket a day keeps a Yankee away. Yes, very true. Yes, and hello to skeptical Salaman Mounder. I'm faring well. Well, the work of Peasant Red Guards was something that the DPRK created. I don't think they were inspired by Mao's People's War. And you also had the Red Young Guards, which were created at a later date, which is for older children, basically teenagers. And, we sometimes, when we, myself or others have visited the DPRK, uh, we've actually seen them. I do not know whether there will be a military parade on February the 8th. There is talk that there will be a military parade for the 9th Congress. I don't know if there would be one for the 8th of February as well, because it is a 78th anniversary. I would have thought not. Maybe, I'm sure on the 80th anniversary in 2028, they will have a very big parade for the day of founding the KPA as a regular Revolutionary Armed Force. Presidents rarely attend farms when it is not the time of elections. The rare exception is Lukashenko, who probably adopted DPRK style and is more often seen in farms and factories than in office. Oh yes, that's true. America has prison slave labor, by the way. The 13th Amendment that supposedly abolished slavery kept it as a form of punishment for prisoners. The hypocrisy continues, and we are not surprised. Well, yeah, I mean that's very true, and you've brought up a very important issue there, and that is in the US they use prison labor on a massive scale, so much so that there is uh, talk of a so-called prison industrial complex in the US, which apparently is very profitable. It's big business. It's very, very big business. They make a lot of money from it, and the prisoners in the US are invariably from Black, Hispanic, and poor white working class backgrounds. And I could also mention, though it seems to have gone quiet on this, but I remember about 10 years ago in the UK, they introduced workfare, where benefit claimants were forced to do unpaid work for capitalist companies, which arguably was a form of slavery. Some people would say to me, but are you opposed to the unemployed working? Do you think the unemployed should just sit at home? Well, no, I don't think that at all. But why didn't these companies give the unemployed proper jobs, proper rates of pay, why were they using the labour of benefit claimants? Well, we all know why. But it is hypocrisy, because all the time the human rights liberals and imperialists bang on about so-called forced labour in the DPRK, that supposedly there's hundreds of thousands held in labour camps, and they're saying, now you've got the NK News gang saying that the new greenhouse in the DPRK Synergy was built by forced labour. It was built by was allegedly built by forced labour, but the imperialists are making prisoners work, and they're using slave labour of the unemployed. Okay. Some people here are arguing about Lukashenko. I don't live in Belarus, so I'm not getting involved in that. In my opinion, Lukashenko is anti-imperialist and independent. He's developing good relations with the DPRK, I believe. Do you know our old friend Latin American 1000? Good to have you on the stream. Hope you're well. Do you know if the CPGB or any other party sent a delegate to the 6th WPK Congress in October 1980? Well, I do indeed know the answer to that question. They actually sent Lou Lewis, a member of the National Executive Committee of the CPGB. They didn't have a CC. They thought it was too Stalinist and tanky, so they called it the Executive Committee. But he was, I believe, a building worker, and he was a member of the NEC of the CPGB, fairly high level, but not that high ranking. The general secretary or assistant general secretary or chair of the party didn't go. It was, say, Lou Lewis. And Lou Lewis was also the unsuccessful communist candidate for Tooting in South London, where he didn't get too many votes. Anyway. Do you think the negative media narrative regarding the DPRK possibly could change in the future? It seems like a lot of Westerners these days are starting to understand why nukes are good to have. Well, to answer your question, it's one of those funny answers, yes and no. Yes, I think it is true that now a lot of people are realizing why the DPRK has nukes up after what happened in Venezuela. But I think it's a different matter whether the mainstream media in the imperialist countries will change their narrative. I don't think they will, because they represent the elite, they represent the bourgeoisie and the imperialists. However, I think some left media, where it exists, will probably change its line. And a few weeks ago, I was in a meeting with Comrade Alejandro Caldebenos, president of the Korean Friendship Association. And he said that he gave a very big conference in Spain to gave a very good big conference to Spain, and a lot of people there had previously supported Cuba or Venezuela or Iran, but they were now eager to hear about the DPRK. So I think among ordinary people and among leftists and socialists and communists, there will be a big change in perceptions of the DPRK. People will realise that the nuclear policy is absolutely correct. If you want to find the source of any kind of human humiliation, oppression, or exploitation, just follow the money. It's easy to spot when you follow that rule. Pepsi did indeed build a factory in the USSR, but it was not popular at all. People said they smelled with squeeze bugs if the USSR bought a license to make jeans. Nobody would make a cult out of them as well. Well, that's interesting. Always thought with building the Pepsi factory in the USSR that they must have got not only modern revisionism but hyperactive children and lots of tooth decay. And what you say about the genes, well, I mean, I was never fortunate enough to visit the USSR when it existed as a socialist country, but I did visit Hungary, and I travelled through the GDR and Czechoslovakia, and I did see people wearing jeans there. So there were people in Eastern Europe wearing jeans, but I take your point that they would have probably been unpopular in the USSR. And I can tell you one of those stories. There used to be a very silly advert for Levi's or Wranglers, probably Levi's jeans back in the 80s, where you see a Soviet citizen, a young Soviet citizen, visits a capitalist country, and he buys a pair of jeans and he hides them in his suitcase and he smuggles them back to the USSR, gets through USSR customs and the KGB and border guard and everything. And you see him going to a very grey, grotty looking flat and getting back and opening the suitcase and ripping the false bottom out and getting the jeans and being very happy. Well, the funny thing was that this awful looking apartment block was not in the Soviet Union and not in any socialist country at all, but it was actually filmed in, wait for it, Glasgow, Scotland. So this place that was meant to be look awful and was meant to symbolise communist oppression was in fact capitalist oppression in Glasgow. Not a lot of people know that, but it's a true story. I think at least a lot of people are starting to realise that the late stage of capitalism is not the way forward, and so are looking for other structures that will open some eyes at least. Well, I totally agree with you there, and it leads me to talk about one subject that I didn't cover when I made my little presentation earlier, but I think it's an important subject worth mentioning. The Epstein scandal. which is massive. And I'm sure there's a lot more stuff that is potentially there that they're trying to cover up. They probably only released what they wanted to. In Britain, we've seen the departure of the awful Peter Mandelson, truly an awful figure, who was very much an architect of New Labour and of Blairism, and very much a chum of Blair and later Starmer. In fact, I could never understand when Arthur Scargill stood in Hartlepool as the Socialist Labour candidate, why the working class electors of Hartlepool didn't vote for Scargill, and why they voted for bourgeois scum like Mandelson. But then as someone put on Twitter, and I'm sure it's really true, that it's often middle class people voting and working class people don't vote. The working class, the proletariat, have been effectively disenfranchised from politics in the countries of the imperial core. I forgot war criminal when talking about Tony Blair. Yes, he is a war criminal. I remember he also got called Tory Blur or Phony Tony. And his main, the thing that he will be most remembered for is the Iraq War, and the fake weapons of mass destruction, which never existed. And of course, that again proves the point about the DPRK's nuclear policy. Iraq got bombed and invaded not because it had nukes or other kinds of weapons of mass destruction, because it didn't have nukes. That is fact. Yugoslavia in 1999 started with Monica. Now, all the news channels are filled with the files of Epstein. Yes, what would be next? Well, probably invasion of Cuba or Venezuela, or an attack on Iran, or even they might try something against the DPRK. Though, because of the DPRK's nukes, there's very little they can do. But it might be something like more sanctions, more psychological warfare. And yes, I agree. Saddam Hussein and Muammar Gaddafi are living dead examples of why not to disarm your nation. That's very true. Absolutely 100% true. I mean, Gaddafi actually gave up his nuclear program, which was in a very early stage. Not he gave it up, but actually allowed the Americans to take it back to the US. I mean, seems unthinkable. He certainly had a funny turn when he did that. He'd been earlier in the 70s and 80s, had been a real firebrand anti-imperialist leader and a great socialist leader. Just went absolutely haywire. And say Saddam actually allowed inspections. He allowed a no-fly zone. And just to continue a little bit about Epstein, I think it shows the total decadence and depravity of the capitalist system, the imperialist system. And it's like, but in some ways, but in other ways it's not, because it's far worse. It's a bit like the Profumo scandal uh, in the early 60s, which actually brought down the Tory government. But I mean, this is which again showed a level of decadence within the ruling class. But I mean, this is so, well, it is stomach turning. It is so sickening. It is such a new level of depravity. But it shows, that what the ruling class get up to. And we get told blah blah blah. They've worked for their wealth, or they're clever. They work hard. Well, no, they don't, because they wouldn't have time to indulge in these kind of activities and have funny little islands and all this kind of thing. The the ruling class are totally decadent and depraved and corrupt, and we must overthrow them. I think it's feel more than ever that we need a socialist revolution, and we need Juche. And of course, one name not in the Epstein files is the name of respected comrade Kim Jong-un. His name is not in the Epstein files, nor is the name of any other DPRK official. That's a fact. Right. What do you think about the rural development policy and the 20x10 policy, from what I've read, being very impressive? Well, that's absolutely true. It's absolutely phenomenal. Construction is going on at such fast rate in the DPRK, and I think the gap between the big cities and the countryside will be finally eliminated. And when the 20x10 policy is finally completed, the DPRK will be able to start progressing towards the higher stage of communism, where people will contribute according to their ability and receive according to need, and all class divisions will be totally eliminated. It is a sad state of affairs, but it's the way of the world these days. You need to carry a big stick. Yes, hello, comrade. Yeah, I mean, absolutely agree with Lozo Amiga. Sorry if I mangled the pronunciation. Profumo seems almost comically innocent compared to the. Yeah, at the time, people thought it was, absolute decadence. Christine Keeler and Mandy Rice Davis, who were quite young, but they were still adults over 18, and were professional prostitutes. But I mean, it was nothing sick and dirty and vile as what Epstein got up to. And not only is the Epstein it was so depraved, but I mean, it was so extensive, and I'm sure there's probably a lot more to come out, which I think they will stop coming out. Gaddafi funded Pakistan's nuclear program. Someone was helping it acquire sensitive data and models. Well, I didn't know that. It's an interesting fact, but it doesn't. alter the fact that it was his, he allowed himself to be talked in to scrapping the Libyan nuclear program, which was not very advanced. The DPRK is really building great looking homes and buildings these days. Yes, and I saw on KSNA this morning that last year 32,000 new homes were built in the countryside, which is really amazing. It's incredible. And DPRK countryside is changing out of all recognition, and the houses they are building, well, it looks just like Britain, really. I read Comrade Kim Jong-un's livestock industry development speech yesterday. Fantastic stuff. The abolition of the antithesis between town and country, only the DPRK dares to even try. Well, that is true. Maybe it'd be good to mention the words Korea and DPRK in the description of the channel so that search engines would use these keywords when people search DPRK and North Korea. Well, that is a good idea. I'll try to take it on. Also, I think most people do not recognise the fragment of Juche Tower or even know about it. Emblem of KFA or some DPRK poster would tell more about the purpose of the channel. Okay, well, I can consider a bit of a revamp of the channel. Perhaps add a new logo to it. Can Juche be applied at an individual level? I know it functions at state level. Secondly, is God a hindrance in the way to Juche? I mean, the belief in God. Well, first of all, Juche is collective, and the individual can only become free as part of the collective. So, I suppose, at an individual level, you can believe in the Juche idea, but in terms of applying it, it has to be applied collectively. Through collective work with other people. And I remember they made this point to me at the Juche Dear Academy in the early or mid-90s. Secondly, is the belief in God a hindrance to the way to Juche? Well, Juche is based on the materialist outlook, not the idealist outlook. It is derived from Marxism-Leninism. It accepts dialectical and historical materialism as a premise, and it stresses that humans are the masters and decide everything. So that would actually rule out the belief that our actions are in some way governed or controlled by a supreme being, a God. However, religious believers of one kind or another may be able to accept different parts of the Juche idea, like the guiding principles of political independence, self-sufficiency in the economy, and self-reliance in national defence. They can cooperate and work with Juche idea followers. And they say people are with religious beliefs can accept some parts of the Juche idea, but ultimately, yes, Juche is rooted in materialism. Right, let's keep hold of the questions. Google. Why do you think socialism survived in Korea? Well, that's a very good question, and one I could talk about all evening, but we haven't got all evening. People have got other things to do, and tomorrow and next week is going to be very busy for me. So I will try and shorten it. I think there's a number of reasons why socialism survived in the DPRK but didn't survive in other countries. And I think basically the short answer, because of the Juche idea and because the DPRK had independence, it didn't join the Comecon or CMEA, the Council for Mutual Economic Assistance of the socialist countries, which basically precluded the development of independent economies in its member states, and of course collapsed when the Soviet Union did. The DPRK did not join the Warsaw Pact either, and it maintained strict political independence. It opposed revisionism. It rejected revisionism, which, as I said, it seems like a long time ago, appeared in the Soviet Union and the socialist camp by the early 1960s. The DPRK struggled against modern revisionism. That's in my book, Anti-Revisionist Fortress of Juche. And it developed policies that rejected right and left deviations. It's put emphasis on ideological work. It stressed the ideological revolution. It stressed putting ideology ahead of all other work, whereas other socialist countries didn't do this. They were heavily infiltrated by bourgeois and Western culture. I've spoken about this many times, based on my own experiences of visiting Eastern Europe in the 80s, where when I was in Hungary, I saw a lot of evidence of deep imperialist ideological and cultural infiltration. You saw people wearing jeans. You saw Madonna posters, but were still Rambo posters. And Rambo was an anti-communist and racist film, but it was being sold openly in the markets in Hungary, and they had McDonald's and all these kind of things. But the DPRK held fast to ideology, and rejected the infiltration of imperialist culture. At the same time, they built up the role of the masses as the masters of the revolution and construction. So, I mean, that is to answer the question simply. As say, I could talk a long time about it, but I would sort of recommend you read the different books that I've written and many articles on the same subject. In fact, I'm just going to call up one. I think, socialism also survived in people's career because it represents the aspirations of the people. It serves the needs of the people. It's people-centered socialism. Mm, right. Well, there are a lot of other questions, so I shall go down and answer them. Well, I would recommend, and you can get it on different secondhand booksellers. I would recommend the 3-volume book on Juche in Our Revolution. I think that is a very good starting point. Also, on the Juche idea, written by Chairman Kim Jong-il. And again, the secondhand copies around. I mean, it's quite old now, but it is a very good read and it's easy to read, beautiful flowing prose. The backbone biography of President Kim Il-sung that was translated in about 1969 or 1968. I would recommend those for those books. And I will come back to you with any with a recommendation for perhaps a shorter work. Oh dear, we have a troll from Miami. Well, I think we've dealt with this point. Selling merchandise actually helps fund KFA activities, and these are actually sold simply to reflect the cost of making them and the cost of postage, plus a small donation to KFA UK. Riding the Shalem is the most beautiful metaphor for the mastery of humans over nature and God. Well, Matt Rose is clearly a CIA troll, and he's come up with the usual line, "Why don't you move to the DPRK?" So he is a troll. Well, I've just removed removed him because we're not going to put up with trolls. And the old "why don't you move to the DPRK" argument is not a not not a valid argument at all. In fact, when people use those kind of arguments, it's a sign of defeat, because it shows that there's nothing else they can say. Yes, definitely a capitalist troll. Very suspicious from Miami, probably a Gassano. Why do you think we are seeing more party congresses in the current period than under the Kim Jong-il period? Well, I think there's several reasons for that. Firstly, they made a change in the policy of holding congresses. Originally, the congresses of the Workers' Party of Korea were essentially programmatic events, at which a program would be set down for the coming period, and then the next Congress would be held once the tasks of the preceding Congress were fulfilled. That was the idea. That the various factors made it difficult to hold congresses, and in fact, during the period, Chairman Kim Jong-il led the DPRK from 1994 to 2011. You had the arduous March period, a period of great difficulty, and you also had the massive pressure by the imperialists on the DPRK under the pretext of the so-called nuclear issue, and you had a very tense situation. So conditions were not good for holding a Congress, and indeed, if they'd held a Congress, for instance, during the arduous March period, you would have heard the imperialist media saying, "Ooh, they're wasting money on holding a big party Congress when the countryside's been devastated by floods and people are in need, etc." So I mean that's part of it. However, the original rules of the Workers' Party Korea, which were that congresses should be held every 5 years, have now been reinstated. I would personally argue that one of the reasons behind sort of changing back to the original rules is that now the DPRK has the nuclear deterrent, a war deterrent. It's created a more secure environment for the construction of socialism and for the party to be able to meet and discuss these matters. So I think that's the reason why we're seeing more party congresses, and the leading role of the Workers' Party of Korea and the efficiency of the party is being increased. Right, let's just go down. Doctor, yes, hello to our friend from Colombia. Dr. Hudson, many of us love music. We know that this is widely controlled by the party. How about if a DPRK talented uh, Afenio, so I can't say that, probably wanted to compose and give music for free for his friends? Any chance? Well, I mean, this happens all the time in the DPRK. Factories and enterprises all have circles, all have singers, and in the DPRK, people are encouraged to learn to play musical instruments and to sing. And in fact, President Kim Il Sung said every DPRK citizen should learn to play at least one musical instrument. And that's a fact. And some of the well-known singers in the DPRK just started out as ordinary workers. The famous Moranbong band were just an art circle of schoolgirls at a secondary school in the DPRK who first met at the Mangyeongdae School Children's Palace. So, you know, these things are possible. Right, okay. Trying to keep track of these questions. I hope I don't lose any. And as I say, also would point out that, you know, sometimes YouTube sometimes hides or deletes questions itself. How can communism be achieved in the DPRK alone? Isn't the solid way of ensuring the permanent stage of socialist experiment to prevent it by being invaded by outside capitalist forces? Well, the DPRK has built up the nuclear deterrent and it's going to build strong conventional forces to safeguard it. And, you know, I think it is possible to certainly advance to the material conditions for communism within one country. Right. Well, I think I've answered the question about party congresses, but I say YouTube does funny things. Well, yes, I think you know, it's very much a matter for a big debate about, you know, whether you should have, you know, communism all over the world. You know, it's wary of that view because it sounds a bit like Trotskyism. But obviously, we would aim for worldwide communism, but obviously worldwide socialism first. Juche is the soul of Korea. Songam is the musculoskeleton of Korea. What Marshal Kim Jong-un is leading Korea is with an intelligent mixture of the best of both. Music is one golden way to express joy and humanity. In my opinion, music should be encouraged everywhere. Well, I couldn't agree more. It's very true. In the proletarian paradise, instead of the angels, one can hear the songs of Moribong. Yes, that's very true. Wonderful Moribong band. Google. What is the difference between Juche and Kim Il-sungism? Well, there isn't one. Juche is a core part of Kim Il-sungism, and the other parts of Kim Il-sungism are the leadership system. And now you have Kim Il-sungism, Kim Jong-ilism, which embodies the Juche idea and the people first idea. Right. How is social mobility in people's career? How does higher education work with regards to people from working class, lower class backgrounds? For example, in the UK, you have to access to higher education depends heavily on your class postcode, etc. Well, firstly, with the UK, I would say higher education has become increasingly more and more elitist with the introduction of tuition fees by war criminal Tony Blair about just under 30 years ago he did that, and he had the slogan education, education and education, and then slapped fees on universities, meaning I think it's now 10,000 a year to study at a British university, which is absolutely absurd, and of course shuts working class people out of universities, and not just working class people, but parts of the lower middle class, the middle strata. It just means education is for a very tiny elite. In the DPRK, it's totally different. Education at all levels in people's career is free of charge, and that includes university education, where it is free of charge. Not only free is the education free, but they get free clothes, free university uniforms, and subsidised food and free accommodation, which British students wouldn't get. So there's no barrier or discrimination to going to university in the DPRK. And a long time ago, President Kim Il-sung instituted the study-wide working program, whereby factory workers and farmers could study different subjects on the job. Nowadays, in the DPRK, in a lot of workplaces, and I've seen them with my own eyes, you've got sci-tech learning spaces where you've got computer terminals, and workers can improve their qualifications by studying online and studying actual university courses. They can connect remotely with universities. You've also got the Grand People's Study House, which some people say is the world's biggest library, about 30 million books, but it's actually more than a library. You can actually go and hear lectures there, and have consultations with academics there. So the DPRK is very socially fluid, and people can advance to a higher level. And back in 2012, and by the way, I'm going to make a video about my 2012 visit to the DPRK for the World Juche Congress. Our guide was a chap called Professor Ri Mu-il from Kim Il-sung University, who was Professor of British Studies at the university. And he told us he'd been a soldier. And he said he actually was in the 1985 military parade in the DPRK. And he actually carried a RPG during the parade, and he'd been able to get into education and become a university professor. People can advance. You don't have the class divisions like you have in the UK. You have a high level of social mobility, and dare I say it, in my experience, the DPRK is the most egalitarian society that I've actually seen. Okay, just picking up. I also question the quality of higher education. I worked as an electrical engineer. Our workshop had newly qualified electrical engineers, didn't have a clue about the subject. Well, that's another interesting point, because the DPRK also combines education with productive labour. It doesn't divorce the one from the other. So there is a connection. Can a person in the DPRK change profession and get a second higher degree free of charge? Well, yes, I think they can, take another degree free of charge, and people can change professions. And in fact, there again, I can tell you a story about a guide that our delegation had in April 2017, a Miss Kill, spelled K-I-L, and she always wanted us to pronounce it Gil, G-I-L, because she said, we said kill, it sounded like kill, which, she didn't like. But anyway, she told us that she had originally been a translator for the DPRK Ministry of Agriculture, but didn't like the job, so she changed to become a university teacher at Kim Il-sung University, where she taught both foreign languages and life sciences. So that's an example of someone who changed their job. And they say the guide we had in 2012 had originally been a soldier, and he became an academic. Thank you very much, Skeptical Salamander, for your praise. It's been in the UK. Well, what can I say? I don't think education in the UK is very good. It's certainly gone downhill a lot, particularly with these horrible academies that you got set up in the Blair era, and like you say, universities have become incredibly elitist. And I would just also like to say a few more words about university education in the UK. It is very elitist. They say it was made worse by them introducing tuition fees and student loans before that. But even in the distant past, in what some people might say were better days, the era of British social democracy, universities tended to be dominated by students from the middle class. And when I was at university, there were very few people from low income and working class backgrounds. And I think out of the course I was on, of about 18 people, only about 2 or 3 were from the working class or poorer strata. So that's 3 out of 18, 1/9 of the course. And now with the introduction of tuition fees, that would even be even smaller. And I would also add a very middle class bourgeois atmosphere at the university. Dear Dr. Hudson, is there any room for vegetarian diet in the DPRK? I know it's a Western trend, but I wonder if there's any interest from people in the DPRK, from people to follow that path. Well, 2 things I can say to that. Firstly, twice in my experience, I've taken vegetarians on delegations with me to the DPRK in 2016, 2017, and last year. And they were able to be given vegetarian food. It wasn't a problem in the hotel. I was told, I have asked this, and I was told there are a few vegetarians in the DPRK. It is not something that's widely followed or very popular, but there are 1 or 2 vegetarians. I think some people in the DPRK choose not to eat meat because it's got, animal fat in it, cholesterol. There's a health argument. I personally, I eat meat, I eat meat pies, etc. But yes, in the DPRK, there's a few vegetarians, and if you go to the DPRK and you're vegetarian, it is not a problem. They can accommodate you. Cindy the Skull, I grew. Oh, wait a minute. As you say, war criminal did his thing. Education is now increasingly profit based instead of learning based to the detriment. That is very true. And I think those academies were a real disaster. I didn't think that much of comprehensive schools, but they were better than the so-called academy schools. Anyway, go on to Cindy. I grew up in a deprived area in the UK in the early 2000s, and uni wasn't even presented as an option. I grew up thinking everyone who went to uni was very smart. Well, again, I can comment on that. Yes, I think to a lot of working class people, university is not presented as an option, and it certainly now with the fees, it is impossible for working class people to have that option. Funny enough, as to the idea, everyone at uni was very smart. When I was at university, there were people there who clearly were not intellectuals at all, and they were not smart. And that was a fact. And just to repeat, what I said earlier, the atmosphere at the place was so bourgeois. I think a lot of working class people, even then, would have been put off. They would have been made to feel quite uncomfortable in the university. And I think when we do get socialism in Britain, we will have to work very hard for social inclusion to eliminate class barriers. Okay, here in the UK, it's 2040, and they say, okay, just reading this comment. Remember, it's Jacob Rees-Mogg, isn't it? Went to university. Uni does not equal smart. Yes, well, I think so did Boris Johnson and all of them. But anyway, I don't know if there's any more questions. I'm surprised you think we'll get socialism in the UK. Well, I think you should always be optimistic. You should always be positive. The Juche idea is based on revolutionary optimism. So, we hope that one day there'll be a socialist Britain, and we will try and fight for it. And I think these days, socialism is becoming more and more valid. And with recent events where you've seen the total decadence of the ruling class, it's needed more than ever. So, on that note, if there's, just wait a few minutes, see if there's other questions. But I'll say a little bit more about stuff that's going on tomorrow. This is why I don't want to go on too much tonight. Tomorrow we've got a real life meeting in London, in Brixton. There'll be details on KFA social media. I'll be talking about Juche-based socialism, also about the DPRK's nuclear deterrent and why it's needed. What we're going to do, as some people have asked, can this be streamed? We are going to try. I will take my computer. I will try and stream it through YouTube or StreamYard. Can't guarantee it. It's all dependent on whether the Wi-Fi at the place actually works. We will give it a crack, but please don't be disappointed if it doesn't come off. Otherwise, if you can't get the stream to work, I'll try and record it or record segments of it and put it on YouTube or Facebook, whatever, later. Google, it is 2 p.m. But the stream will probably start about 10 minutes after the start of the meeting. But I'll put all the details up, and the old fingers crossed that the Wi-Fi and IT will work. Okay. Starting to get a lot of questions. Is there a chance for a People's Republic of England? Well, yes, I think so. But, I like to be optimistic, but it won't be easy. And there'd be all sorts of obstacles, not least the appalling low level of consciousness in this country. So if you've already covered it, but do you foresee the fall of Cuba's government? I'm hoping to visit for May Day. Well, a big question. And yeah, I'm a great supporter of the Cuba of Fidel and Che Guevara. But it is my personal opinion that Cuba went downhill after the passing of Fidel. Now, Trump is talking about overthrowing Cuba. He is trying to impose a total blockade in Cuba to cut off the oil supplies. And Cuba is not self-reliant like the DPRK. So it's in a very tight situation. And we saw back in 2020 when there was counter-revolutionary riots staged in Cuba by counter-revolutionary lumpen elements, that there's certain weaknesses in Cuba. And, I think very clearly the reasons for these events happening were first of all, the sanctions and blockade by the imperialists. That was the number one reason. Secondly, the ideological and cultural infiltration of the imperialists and their psychological warfare. But a third reason, not discussed, was some of the measures that the Cuban government took towards so-called reform, I think, which are, in my opinion, my personal opinion, weakened socialism in Cuba. So I think the situation is very difficult. I saw reports somewhere that, which have not been yet confirmed, that the Cuban government was going to talk to Trump, which I think could only be a bad thing, because Trump has made his views and aims very clear. He wants to see the dismantlement of socialism in Cuba. So what could these talks be about? They could only be about ending socialism in Cuba. And I hope this is not the case. And I would just like to express the hope, despite my misgivings about the direction of Cuba in recent years. And by the way, they also established relations with the ROK puppets. It is my hope that the Cuban people will be able to defend socialism, will be able to defend the sovereignty of their country and fight to the end, even if the US imperialists do impose a total blockade. Hope they will fight to the end. And again, coming back to about nearly 2 hours before, Cuba was badly betrayed in 1962 by the Soviets when they took the missiles out. And just think, if the missiles had stayed in Cuba, and they were now under the control of the Cuban people, the US wouldn't be threatening Cuba. If Cuba had nukes, it wouldn't get threatened. I hope that the Cuban people will be able to thwart counter-revolution and maintain socialism in Cuba. And I hope that you'll be able to visit Cuba on May Day, which is in a few months. That's my answer. But yeah, returning to the subject of meetings here, we got the meeting tomorrow in Brixton. Next Friday night, I'm addressing a meeting in Ipswich on the subject of life in a socialist country. And that will be in Ipswich. I can give anyone who's watching from East Anglia, send me a message. I'll give you the details of where to get to the meeting. February 16th, we're going to have an online meeting for anyone who couldn't attend the real life meeting tomorrow. And we will plan some more activities. So, like I say, it's all go at KFA UK in the British Group for the Study of the Juche idea. Hope people have enjoyed the live stream and found it useful. I hope to be back in 2 weeks, maybe 3 weeks, but I'm going to try and be back in 2 weeks. I'm going to be making a few more videos. I'm going to make a video about my 2002 trip to the DPRK and about the 2012 trip to the DPRK. Also going to be doing one on the DPRK's assistance to national liberation. So thank you for the good night wishes, and I wish everybody a very good evening and see you all again soon. And thank you for your support. Goodbye.